Imagine a story so cruel it would feel unwatchable on screen, a main character burdened with endless suffering, tragedy striking at every turn, and no relief in sight. Most would call it a sadistic plot, too heavy to endure. Yet, for one woman, this wasn't fiction. She was adored by millions, admired for her talent and charm, but behind the curtain, her life mirrored that merciless script. A woman destined to keep falling into the darkest pits of pain, no matter how brightly she shined in the spotlight. So in this video, we uncover the heartbreaking tragedy of Christina Applegate, a story that only seems to grow darker with time. Her rise to fame in Hollywood is well known, but her beginnings were far from glamorous. Born on November 25, 1971, in Los Angeles, Christina entered a world already weighed down by struggle. Her mother, Nancy Pretty, a singer and actress chasing small breaks, and her father, Bob Applegate, a record producer, were already falling apart. Within months, their marriage collapsed. Her father vanished from her daily life before she was old enough to even remember his face. Years later, Christina would confess she longed for the bond that never came. That absence left Nancy to raise her daughter alone, scraping to survive. And it left Christina with a burden no child should ever carry, growing up in the shadow of abandonment, forced to step into strength long before her time. Her mother managed to land the occasional acting role, but never enough to keep the household afloat. That responsibility fell on Christina, still just a child. Before she was even out of elementary school, she became the family's breadwinner. She recorded radio commercials, appeared in television ads, and chased auditions not for fame, but for survival. Every paycheck kept the lights on, every role kept food on the table. Christina would later admit with brutal honesty, her childhood wasn't about dreams, it was about survival. Every dollar came from her, and every meal depended on her ability to work. But her struggles didn't end there. At just 7 years old, her world shattered again. Her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. Nancy endured a mastectomy, and for a brief moment, it seemed like she might beat it. But the disease was relentless. From 1986 to 1988, Christina watched her mother endure 7 surgeries, each one taking more from her. Hospitals became Christina's second home, and fear became her constant companion, fear that the only parent she had left would be taken from her. And when doctors warned her that a mother's breast cancer drastically raised the daughter's own risk, Christina grew up carrying not just trauma, but a shadow of inevitability that would follow her for life. From the age of 7, Christina was aware that her future would be filled with turmoil. This burden had been passed down through generations before her. As she grew older, she discovered that her grandmother's existence was marred by violence. Her father, Bob, had been raised not by his mother, but by his grandmother, as his own mother, Lavina Shaw, had endured her own hell. Lavina suffered severe abuse and emotional devastation at the hands of her husband, Paul Applegate. In 1941, while pregnant, she attempted to escape by filing for divorce, but Paul forcibly brought her back. He accused her of infidelity, took away her son, and ultimately shattered her spirit. Although she remarried, she tragically passed away in 1955 at the young age of 33, officially due to tuberculosis and cirrhosis of the liver, a life ruined by violence and addiction. Christina later acknowledged that her family was among the more troubled ones. This darkness seeped into her own adult relationships. In 2001, she wed actor Jonathan Shake, yearning for the stability she had never known. However, the marriage quickly fell apart. By 2005, they were living separately, and by 2007, they were officially divorced. Another failed relationship felt like a curse. That same year, she was gearing up for what could be the performance of her lifetime, leading a Broadway revival of Sweet Charity. For Christina, who had spent her childhood acting on television, this was an opportunity to demonstrate her ability to captivate an audience on stage. Unfortunately, while rehearsing in Chicago, she suffered a fracture in her foot. What was initially thought to be a temporary setback turned into lasting damage. Years later, she confessed that she would never be able to dance again. Broadway, a dream for countless actors, became the stage where her body let her down. Despite the pain, she pushed through, even receiving a Tony nomination. Yet, the price she paid was that a significant part of her career was taken from her forever. What came next was perhaps the cruelest blow of all. After her marriage ended, Christina fell in love with fisherman and photographer Lee Grievous, a man who was young, charismatic, and artistic, but haunted by addiction. Their relationship was a cycle of passion and pain, breaking apart and coming back together, each time weighed down by battles she couldn't win for him. Then, in July 2008, tragedy struck. Lee was found dead in his Hollywood apartment, taken by an overdose at just 26 years old. Christina later called him an incredible human being, someone she loved deeply, but love alone wasn't enough to save him. Another man she cared for was gone, stolen far too soon. By her mid-30s, Christina Applegate had everything the world thought defined success: money, fame, awards, a name known in every household. But behind the glamour was a life marked by abandonment, abuse, cancer, injury, heartbreak, and death. Every triumph was shadowed by tragedy. Every victory came with a cost. By 2008, at just 36 years old, Christina stood at the height of her career, but also at the edge of one of the darkest chapters of her life. But her world fell apart in August of that year. Something odd was discovered via a regular MRI. It was confirmed by a biopsy. Carcinoma of the breast. She had finally been discovered by the illness that had been killing her family for decades. She was initially terrified because she was younger than her mother had been when she was first diagnosed. She later acknowledged that she was terrified, confused, and unable to understand that her worst dread had materialized. At the very least, the diagnosis should have been confidential. However, someone told the media about Christina's health before she was even prepared to tell her closest friends. Her biggest personal conflict overnight was with the press. She hadn't processed it herself, hadn't told her family, and now everyone knew. She was devastated by the loss of control and the impending danger of the illness. She later admitted that she experienced a complete emotional breakdown, trembling, broken, and having to respond to questions about her body before she had even started to grieve. Christina first had a lumpectomy in the hopes of containing the cancer, but the truth was more dire. The BRCA1 mutation, which Angelina Jolie would later disclose she possessed, was the one she tested positive for. This meant that Christina had a huge 85% chance of recurrence. She took the heartbreaking choice to have a double mectomy when faced with the prospect of battling cancer repeatedly. She gave a direct account of the surgery. "I simply let them go. It has nothing to do with choice or vanity. It was a matter of survival." However, it was an emotional amputation to lose both breasts at the age of 36 in the midst of her career. She acknowledged that she didn't have time to think about it. Without ever mourning the body she lost, she was compelled to go into business mode and deal with surgery, recuperation, and media attention. It was not only a physical toll. Following surgery, she was left with scars that would never go away, drainage tubes dangling from her chest, and a body that no longer seemed like her own. The silence she had to keep was much more agonizing than the pain of reconstruction. Despite being forced to face the world, she was still required to seem strong and smile during interviews. She was collapsing inside. Here, cancer did not perish. Ultimately, there was now concern about ovarian cancer. Furthermore, breast tissue is not the only place where the BRCA mutation occurs. It significantly increases the risk of ovarian cancer, which had already claimed the life of one of her cousins in 2008. Christina's fear increased. Her body felt like a ticking time bomb, she admitted. She brutally decided to have her fallopian tubes and ovaries removed by 2017. Her chances of becoming pregnant at 45 ended on an operating table. Although the procedure provided her with some relief, she acknowledged that it also caused her to grieve for yet another loss. Her capacity to conceive and start the family she had always desired. Her medical crisis was handled like a spectacle by the media. While undergoing treatment, she was surrounded by photographers who waited outside her home to take pictures of a woman who had been cut open and was attempting to recover. Later, Christina talked about how intrusive it seemed and how much it contributed to her emotional breakdown. It was forbidden for her to be human. She made the news. She also had to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, insomnia, and the hidden costs of cancer treatment. She acknowledged that she had trouble sleeping for decades, but the years she spent with cancer made it worse. She would remain awake at night, wondering if every sensation was an indication of a recurrence while her body ached and her thoughts raced. The family weight was another. Christina had witnessed her mother's 2 victories over breast cancer as a child. She had witnessed her cousin's death from ovarian cancer and her grandmother's early death. She now had to think about the possibility that she would give her daughter the same destiny. Because of her genetic abnormality, she feared about Suddy's future while fighting for her life. Would the same curse hound her kid as she grew up? The public witnessed her resilience, humor, and grin. In private, however, she acknowledged that she was heartbroken. Her identity, her body, and her will to live had to be rebuilt. She stated that nothing made the worry go away, even though she adopted healthier habits and altered her diet. Every visit to the doctor was an opportunity to die. Each scan served as a reminder of how precarious her life was. Nor were her relationships impervious. Christina was harassed by a stalker who posted violent threats against her partner, Martin Lenabil, around the same time. Online messages said that being with her would blow his head off. Christina also had to deal with the worry that someone may try to murder the man she loved while she was recuperating from surgery. Despite their investigation, the LAPD never made an arrest. Another feeling of powerlessness. Her body was taken by cancer, her privacy by fame, her safety by obsession, and yet she had to continue working. Tragic events don't stop Hollywood. Christina was expected to perform despite losing her breasts and live under continual medical observation. She once claimed that her sense of humor served as her disguise, her shield, which allowed her to continue operating. However, she acknowledged in private that everything had changed. She was living in continual anxiety of what would happen next, mourning her own body, and mourning her feeling of security. Christina Applegate was a survivor in name at the end of the decade. She had defeated cancer. The organs that were most likely to betray her had been removed. She was still performing, still well known, and still adored by viewers. However, the truth was more sinister. They had stolen her health. She had been disfigured. She lost her ability to conceive. Her personal trauma was used for financial gain. And knowing that she might only ever be one scan away from another battle for her life left her mind permanently wounded. Christina Applegate has suffered with sleeplessness since childhood and had dealt with it for the majority of her career. However, it got intolerable after cancer. She lay awake until morning night every night. Her mind was burning, but her body was tired. She characterized her nights as never-ending panic attacks in which she relived every scar, diagnosis, and worry. It was never resolved by treatment or medication. She said that she frequently didn't get any sleep at all. Her sadness was fueled by insomnia. Her depression exacerbated her loneliness, which in turn prompted her to engage in riskier coping mechanisms. Before booze and fame were her escape, she had begun drinking in her early years. She acknowledged that she abused alcohol for extended periods of time. She was still drinking heavily in 2008, only a few weeks after having a doublemectomy. She previously said that the only thing that numbed her was drink and that she didn't want to cope with reality. But she lost more than just drink. Following the birth of her daughter Suddy in 2011, Christina longed to grow her family. She publicly expressed her desire for additional children, but she was vulnerable due to her health and surgery. She acknowledged that she had tried but failed in 2018. Several miscarriages plagued her. The kind of anguish she didn't discuss in public for years, she said, was crushing. She was saddened by the frequent losses before losing her ovaries, which ruined her hope entirely. She acknowledged that beneath the popular comedic character, it was one of the most profound traumas of her life. Her private life was invaded by danger even as she attempted to recover. Online stalkers targeted Christina for almost 10 years. Fearing for her safety and her partner's life, Christina lived under police observation. She later acknowledged that she always looked over her shoulder and felt like a prisoner even in her own house. Her fear was only heightened by the threats. She was already afraid that cancer will come back. Trauma was already causing her to lose sleep. She now had to deal with the fact that someone wanted her dead. Already damaged, Christina's body started to turn on her in unexpected ways. She had been complaining of persistent fatigue, numbness in her feet, and discomfort in her legs for a long time. The truth arrived in 2021. Multiple sclerosis, a degenerative neurological illness that gradually impairs movement, was the diagnosis made for her. However, the indications had existed for years. She found it difficult to move between sets while filming Dead to Me. She spoke of persistent exhaustion, abrupt waves of vertigo, and balance problems that caused her to stumble. She was devastated by the diagnosis. She went on to say, "It's been a tough road, you know, but as we all know, the road keeps going." The private destruction was what she kept quiet about. MS is progressive, incurable, and lifelong. It was an additional punishment that a woman who had already experienced miscarriages, chronic insomnia, and surgical scarring couldn't get out of. She almost broke while filming her last season of Dead to Me. To travel across the set, she needed a wheelchair. She needed to be physically supported by crew workers in order to stand for scenes. She acknowledged that she was no longer able to watch herself on screen since she appeared so altered and ill. It was a harsh transition from Hollywood celebrity to a woman struggling to survive. She said that she was now a separate person, imprisoned in a body that would never recover. Although the public applauded her courage, Christina acknowledged that it was intolerable. She told friends that the pain, the exhaustion, and the way her legs occasionally abruptly quit working were things she would never get used to. She disclosed that she detested her appearance, felt her career was finished, and had put on 40 pounds as a result of the medicine. She publicly declared that she was done performing on screen. But it wasn't even suffering or renown that caused the most agony. It was the awareness that her daughter would witness her decline as she grew up. Sudhi had already witnessed her mother's decline in health, fertility, and breast size. She would now have to watch as her mother gradually lost the capacity to walk, move, and lead an independent life. Christina acknowledged that her biggest worry was that her daughter would have to take care of her rather than pursue her own interests. Her body wasn't simply taken by MS. Her independence was crushed. She used to like running, dancing, and even just taking her dog for walks. By 2022, those items had vanished. Reporters were informed that she was unable to safely cross the street. She needed ramps to get through doors and bars to grab onto in the shower, so she had to relearn how to live in her own house. She was still plagued by the fear of cancer returning on top of everything else. She was aware that the mutation left her vulnerable, even after having her ovaries and breasts removed. The same idea accompanied every agony and every new pain. Has it returned? When Christina was awarded her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2022, she was using a cane to get around. She thanked her friends and her daughter, but she later gently acknowledged that she was afraid it would be her final appearance. Her career was supposed to be celebrated by the star on the sidewalk. It seemed to Christina like a grave marker for the life she had lived. By 2022, the public's perception of Christina Applegate had changed. Her fight with multiple sclerosis progressed more quickly than anyone anticipated. After receiving her diagnosis, she was unable to walk unassisted within a year. She told interviewers that she was lying in bed for days at a time due to exhaustion, that her legs simply stopped listening to her, and that she lost her balance. She used walkers and canes at home. She used a wheelchair in public. The girl, who used to dance on sitcom sets, was now stuck in a body that would not do what she asked. The humiliation never stopped. Every appearance served as a reminder of her decline. She required help to stand for her Walk of Fame ceremony. After giving the cameras a smile, she later acknowledged that it was everything she could do to stay upright. She knew that pictures of her cane would go viral, proving what she had worked so hard to hide, that her life, her profession, and her independence were finished. The 2023 Screen Actors Guild Awards were her first significant public appearance following her diagnosis. She leaned on her daughter Suddy for support as she made an appearance in a striking black gown. She received a standing ovation from the audience. It appeared to be victory to those outside. It felt like a funeral to Christina. She subsequently declared that she was done with pretending, red carpeting, and on-screen acting. "I don't have it in me," she stated plainly. Retirement was not a decision made voluntarily. It was forced into exile because of an illness that had taken away her future, her movement, and her health. Life at home became gloomier. Christina disclosed that she was no longer able to cook for herself, take a shower by herself, or cross the street without worrying about passing out. She erected bars all over her house, wheelchairs in several rooms, and ramps where stairs had stood. Even getting dressed turned into a tiresome struggle. She acknowledged that she occasionally spent days in bed, unable to move or interact with the outside world. There was no alleviation from the drug. She continued to put on weight. Her physique grew, and her face transformed. Mirrors were something she detested. She acknowledged that she was unable to watch her own program. "I'm no longer dead." It was unbearable to watch her struggle on screen, swollen and ill. "I don't appear to be myself." The statement was, "I don't feel like myself." She was nonetheless referred to as lovely by the world. She was devastated. Her lifeline was her daughter. When Suddy's mother's diagnosis was made public, she was just 12. Old enough to notice the decrease, yet too young to truly comprehend. Christina acknowledged that she was overcome with remorse and worried that taking care of an ill parent would take away from Suddy's early years. She acknowledged that she worried being a burden, but she also referred to Suddy as her reason for existing. She had good reason to be afraid. By 2023, Christina admitted to friends that she was always thinking about dying. She admitted that MS had destroyed her and that she once in a while puzzled if it was really worth persevering with. She tried to maintain her humor alive, joking that she turned into now disabled, however in the back of the jokes changed into depression. She said in interviews that her existence had come to be small. No more sets, no greater ranges, just ache, medicine, and survival. The sickness brought new humiliations. She evolved neuropathy in her feet, making every step sense like on foot on damaged glass. Her fingers once in a while locked, leaving her not able to grip even a fork. She advised one buddy she feared she could lose the capability to talk, to swallow, to breathe on her personal. MS could rob her of everything, and she or he knew it became handiest a remember of time. Her private fears that she so bravely concealed bled into public statements. In 2023, she advised the Big Apple Times she might never act on camera once more. She admitted that she ought to barely stroll across a room. She advised Vanity Truthful that she stayed in mattress maximum days, that her world had contracted to the size of her house. She instructed Kelly Clarkson that she no longer identified her frame, that she hated the reflection staring lower back at her. Those were now not promotional interviews. They have been confessions. Fans begged her to fight. To Christina, combating became meaningless. There was no cure, no victory, no destiny, just decline. She admitted she frequently felt invisible, erased through illness, stripped of everything she as soon as became. In 2024, she found out a detail that taken aback even her supporters. She had begun using a wheelchair almost complete time. Status for greater than 5 minutes left her dizzy. Walking throughout a room left her gasping. She defined herself as trapped. And at the same time as she smiled for photographs, the reality was written throughout her face. Christina Applegate, once a symbol of light comedy, was loss of life by means of inches. Every tragedy of her past appeared to return straight away. Most cancers had mutilated her body. Miscarriages had broken her goals of own family. Insomnia had destroyed her nights. Stalkers had stolen her peace, and now MS had stolen her destiny. The load of it all crushed her until there has been nothing left to cover. By way of 2025, Christina had all but disappeared from Hollywood. She gave a handful of podcast interviews, raw and broken, in which she admitted she sometimes thought of giving up. She spoke about death no longer with fear, however with exhaustion. She confessed that she had already misplaced a lot, that she failed to know how an awful lot extra she ought to take.